On today's show, Darrell and I are talking about why we need a pre-pitch routine. Hey guys, welcome back to Strategic Baseball Podcast. We hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Darrell and I have been pretty busy. I went down to Cancun and it was a blast, and Darrell went and spent some time with some family. But now we're back and we want to talk about pre-pitch routine. So we're going to spend the next couple shows talking about it. And on today's show, we're going to talk about why we need a pre-pitch routine. Geoff and Darrell here, and we are a part of a group of baseball instructors and coaches that you probably have never heard of before. We don't rely on cookie cutter evaluation to assess and judge baseball players. We don't judge players on physical talent alone. In fact, we do the exact opposite. We use strategic assessment and individualized training that we know can help any player get better. Because we are fighting against too many players and parents giving up on baseball too soon, we have to evaluate players differently. We have to do things more strategically. We don't have the ability to pick our players from a huge pool of talented players. Every day, we have to take players where they currently are and build on the skills they currently have. So, we focus more on building a strategic advantage mindset more than the physical talent early on. So how do we do that? How do we convince players to believe in themselves? If you ask some high school coaches, college recruiters, or pro scouts, they'll tell you that it's a waste of time. Some players just don't have it. Yet, it's happening every single day. It's happening through strategic assessment and hyper-individualized training that we call Strategic Advantage Baseball. This is Strategic Baseball Podcast, and these are our stories. All right, Darrell, I'm going to let you kick this off. On today's show, we're talking about why we need a pre-pitch routine.
Yeah, Geoff, I think this is interesting, man, because of what we do here at Athletic Mission. This truly is and the foundation of how we teach and how we work and create individual player development plans. And at the end of the day, baseball, honestly, and the way you and I bang it around and talk about it all the time, 90% of baseball happens in the pre-pitch routine. You know what? 90% of baseball really is about those pre-pitch thoughts and what you and I kind of called this strategic anticipation. That's the reality of the game of baseball. And so we can dissect it 100 different ways from there. But the reality of it is, man, the culmination of our off-season training, our preseason practice, all the things that we do, all the baseball-related activities that we do, the reality of it is it culminates in that pre-pitch routine. For a pitcher, it culminates into how we think about what this hitter is thinking about me and what is the absolute best pitch I should throw right now. And I think we dumb that down, just to be real with you. And I think you and I kind of take the opposite approach here. We want 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds to grasp this piece of it. And even though they're not going to understand it completely until really they get to the 60-foot mound and they're facing, pitchers throwing from 60 foot. But once they get that piece of why a pre-pitch routine is important and kind of how it helps me mentally, strategically, and physically, then it really does change the way they see the game of baseball. And so the aspects that you and I really focus on is that there's three components to baseball. There's a mental side, a strategic side, and a physical side. And honestly, I don't even like calling it sides. It's really just the intersections of what it takes to really be a good baseball player, the mental focus and toughness and however different, psychologists and then baseball coaches kind of describe it. And then the reality of what happens. And the big piece of what you and I preach to these guys is that practice is about you and game day is about the opponent. And when we get these questions from parents and players and on the podcast and email and really the biggest struggle that we see is that we have these kids that are pretty good athletes, these kids that get it, like they practice pretty well, man. And then they struggle taking it to the game. And the first question you and I usually ask either new clients are coming in or our older college and pro clients when we're talking to them, it's really usually not a physical capability thing. It might manifest itself physically because of the way our brain works, the way we focus on how we're trying to dissect what the problem is and kind of what we think the symptoms are, and then kind of trying to address the symptom instead of really addressing what the core issue is. And what we're finding that a lot of times these guys got good pitches, man. From the pitcher side of it, they got good pitches, man. They in the bullpen execute quality pitches, and a lot of them can do it on purpose. So what happens is there's some mindset shift that's not happening from practice to the game, and that's not usually a physical thing. That's usually a mental thing about what they're thinking about, and then usually it causes strategic issues. So when the game starts, instead of them being focused on the hitter, they're more focused about what they're doing or what they're not being able to do. And again, man, the way we preach it is practice is about you, game day is about your opponent. And when you make that mindset shift, when you cross that wide line and the game is for real, then it should change the way you think about, hey, now it's time to play and execute. It's not really about, I can't be focused on what I can do and can't do. The reality of how that plays out is baseball, and where we have to make those confident adjustments at is inside that pre-pitch routine. And so I think that's why we're wanting to take a few shows here and really break down like why a pre-pitch routine is important, and then kind of addressing what is the wrong type of thinking early, or really kind of what is wrong with most players' pre-pitch routine, and then kind of give them the overview of how it works and if it's working and when it's not working. And then again, when we start looking at that, a lot of times the struggles manifest themselves physically, either in how we emotionally react, whether it's body language, and which we'll dig deeper into in a future show. But when we really start looking at the importance of the pre-pitch routine, I don't think we can overestimate how important it is. I don't think we can overemphasize how important to the game of baseball for each individual player that the pre-pitch routine really is. And so I think we do have a lot of information out there that teaches the physical side of it, kind of the setup and kind of, literally what is your mechanics? What is the rhythm, tempo, and timing that you pitch with? And kind of identifying that piece and seeing if guys are tipping pitches and different pieces of that body language. But I think what we haven't focused on is literally teaching these guys what their pre-pitch thoughts ought to be. And I think in the next show, we're going to break that down about, kind of what is the things as pitchers and coaches that we're kind of got the wrong, impression about what a pre-pitch routine really is and kind of how we work through it. And so this one, I really want to drive home that, hey, 90% of baseball happens in that pre-pitch routine. If you're a good player and you're playing against high-level competition, that pre-pitch decision-making process, that chess match between the pitcher and the hitter happens in that pre-pitch routine. And then really, break it down to the three aspects of baseball: the mental, the strategic, and the physical. And once guys see it from that perspective, then we do understand what off-season training is meant to do. We do start to see how the preseason practice is really where we take the gains from our off-season and start converting them gains and strength gains and getting healthy and recovery inside of that preseason, timetable of really focusing now that we got to turn those gains into mastered baseball skills. And then obviously when the season starts, it turns into more of the strategic side. How do we prepare for the opponent? How do we recover? How do we get ready and stay sharp and then, play the next game or have the next outing? And when we kind of put it in that format here at Athletic Mission, I think guys see now the game, not so much from a measurables perspective, but more from really this kind of strategic advantage mindset perspective that we teach. And it makes a huge difference, again, not only in how these guys show up and perform on game day, but also in the post-game evaluations when we're kind of dissecting what happened. They give us a lot better answers, and it's real. It's really what happened and what they were thinking. And so that's kind of why I wanted to break this down, man. So what do you kind of lay out what you see from the hitting side?
Right. And, when we hear that baseball 90% mental, you and I are sitting there thinking, okay, yeah, but there's a little bit more to it. So we believe that 90% of baseball is in the pre-pitch routine. And you and I like to break that down into the physical, mental, and strategic all together. And so when guys are going through their pre-pitch routine, they're covering all three of these things, and all three of these things need to happen: the physical, mental, and strategic. So when guys hear about pre-pitch routine, most of the time they're thinking about the physical and the ritual that they develop, which is definitely a part of it. But what we are telling ourselves and what we are thinking during this physical routine is super important. It's why we have a pre-pitch routine. We got to have the right type of thinking. So as a hitter, I got to be thinking about what I know about myself, what I know about this guy, and what am I thinking in real time to determine what is the best pitch for me to look for in this situation and this count. This is the strategic side. This is the pre-pitch routine side. This is the decision-making process that we talk about. This is the them part. This is the keeping myself present part. This is the focusing on one pitch at a time part. As you and I, Darrell, said in previous episodes, this is the them part. We're talking about training. When we talk about training, we're talking about that's the you part. And on game day, it's about the opponent. So if we're sitting here on game day and we're thinking about us, what we need to do or what we can't do, then we aren't ready for them. And like you said, now we got the wrong thinking going on. And the story we tell ourselves about how we don't trust ourselves to execute with two strikes, or we don't trust our ability to hit behind the runner to drive in, now manifests itself, and now it's creating issues with our swing and our approach. The pre-pitch routine must be practiced. We have all of our hitters go through their pre-pitch routine during practice, especially when we do our command hitting exercise. I have every single guy walk me through their decision-making process for whatever the situation account we are getting ready to execute. And some of these guys do really, really well. And the other times I have to kind of keep asking questions until we get to the right answer based on what they are capable of doing. A lot of guys will answer what they want to do, based on the textbook answer. But if they haven't mastered that, or they cannot trust themselves to be able to execute, then we have to readjust our thinking. And this is the process that we have them think through. And then over time, it gets easier for them, and they start to trust and have confidence in their pre-pitch routine. But if we don't practice this every time, and every time they come in, and we can't just expect it to show up on game day. It just doesn't work that way. So the pre-pitch routine, is super important. It needs to be, the pre-pitch routine needs to be what we teach. Darrell and I say this all the time. That's how important we think it is. If you told us there was only one thing that we could teach, Darrell and I would pick the pre-pitch routine. It doesn't just show up on game day. This is this type of strategic thinking has to happen in practice. The right type of thinking, and the thinking that leads to the confident adjustment.
Yeah, man. And I think you nailed it, because it really is. We're seeing that when they grasp this piece of the game, that it's changing game day results, man, which is ultimately what every player wants, every parent wants, every coach wants. And when they see it, and I think we're also seeing a lot of high-level D1 coaches really starting to complain a little bit out loud or on social media about that kids are phenomenal athletes, that their measurables are off the charts, but their actual game day skills, man, their game ready skills, that how they show up and play baseball is built into that pre-pitch routine. It's the way all of us that played the game at a high level, that we were taught the game that way. We were taught when we were 10, 11, and 12, the intangible piece of the game. And then kind of the physical development came as you kind of matured and grew literally as a person. And what we see now is that we put so much emphasis on the physical development, which is important. I'm not downplaying that. But what we're missing here, man, and I think we're starting to see some of that reverberation in college baseball and pro baseball, is that, you're starting to see some of the old school guys that are really hip to the times, but man, they understand how the game's really played, and getting frustrated with some of the kids that are showing up on campus or at spring training and really don't understand the pure decision-making process that goes into every pitch, or it goes into every at bat, or every, in your pre-pitch routine. And I think that's why, from what we've seen and the type of players that we work with, that we want them to grasp that piece of it. Because if they do, then what happens, I think, is they're not so much focused on the measurables as they are now about what their skills are, their mastered skills, their mastered pitches, and what it takes to go execute those in a real game. So we get more out of that compare and convince mindset, and really get into that compete and contribute mindset, which is what every coach really wants. And honestly, it's what every player really wants. So we really do got to kind of, readjust the focus from, is it a pure measurables evaluation, or what happens on game day, and how do we show up and play on game day? And again, is there an aspect of both? Absolutely. But what we need to really drive home is that baseball is played on game day. Practice is practice, and practice needs to be about you getting bigger, faster, stronger, improving your baseball skills, and mastering the skills that you're going to use in a game. But apart from that, when the game starts, it's about the opponent. It's about what kind of strategic advantage you have on them, and playing the game pitch by pitch and a bat by a bat and inning to inning. And when we get that piece right, then we see the measurables get better. That's the cool thing about it. We see the physical skills really start to come to the forefront. And I think that's the beautiful thing about it, man. When we really do get the pre-pitch routine right, it brings out the best in the players of what they're really capable of doing. And the game gets better, man.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about it a lot on other episodes, that the pre-pitch routine, the process, and again, for hitting, the process is going to be the stick process, the seeing the ball, the timing, the knowledge of the zone, and the swinging. That is the pre-pitch routine. That is the how-to that will improve the measurables. And the guys that buy into that, they see how the pre-pitch routine manifests itself into good thinking and good decision-making processes.
Right. Yeah, man. And that's the takeaway I want them to have from this show, is that the 90% of baseball happens in that pre-pitch decision-making process. And if you get that piece right, then it's amazing how your measurables and your physical skills seem to come out and show the talent that you really have. When you struggle in that pre-pitch process, then it's amazing how your brain just kind of shuts your body down, and we just don't perform the way we could or we should, just to be honest about it. So that's my big takeaway, man. 90% of baseball happens in that pre-pitch decision-making process. We get that right, or we get better at that, then we're going to improve as baseball players.
Yep. I'm right there with you, man. That's my takeaway as well. The 90% of the game of baseball is in the pre-pitch routine. So Good show, man. So again, we're talking about why our pre-pitch routine matters. So again, as always, if you guys are finding any value in these episodes, please leave us an objective review and then head over to strategic-baseball.com and join our circle. We got stuff we're working on. We're ready to share it with you all. Catch you guys in the next episode.